You've heard us talk about hormone therapy by Happy Mammoth many times by now. It's a supplement that helps women maintain optimal hormone levels with over 50,000 glowing reviews from women all over the globe. 98% say that they would recommend it to friends and family. And that's why we're recommending it to you. Now we can take those hormone harmony results even further by pairing it with Happy Mammoth's probiotic collagen protein. It helps restore gut lining integrity, promoting overall hormone balance. It also helps relieve occasional bloating, reduce sugar cravings, and helps you feel satisfied longer. Because your gut directly affects your hormones, improving gut health can amplify your hormone harmony results so you feel like yourself again. Happy Mammoth is dedicated to making women's lives easier, and that means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and it shows. Right now, you can try prebiotic collagen protein and hormone harmony risk-free and get 15% off your entire order with code MurderDiaries at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use code MurderDiaries for 15% off today.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. Everyone is telling her she dreamt it, but in The Woman in Cabin 10, Lo Blacklock is determined to uncover the truth. In the gripping new thriller coming to Netflix October 10th, Keira Knightley plays a journalist aboard a luxury yacht who witnesses a crime she can't unsee. Adapted from Ruth Ware's best-selling novel, directed by Simon Stone. Watch The Woman in Cabin 10, only on Netflix on October 10th.
Ah, Smart Water. Pure, crisp taste.
That's really good water.
It's the kind of water that says, I have my life together.
I do feel more sophisticated.
Smart Water. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
Welcome to the Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige. Make sure if you want to listen ad-free that you head over to patreon.com/themurderdiariespod or search The Murder Diaries ad-free on Spotify. Also, please make sure to leave us a positive review on Apple and subscribe on YouTube and all of our socials. It really helps us keep the Murder Diaries going.
On a cold, rainy December night in Dublin, 22-year-old Trevor Deely left his company's Christmas party and began the long walk home. With no taxis available due to a citywide strike and no umbrella to shield him from the storm, he made a quick detour to his office, knowing there were always a few branded ones lying around. He swiped in with his work key card, had a brief chat with a colleague on the night shift, and warmed up a cup of tea. Then, just after 4 a.m., he stepped back into the rain and disappeared. When Trevor didn't show up for work the next day, it was assumed he was simply sleeping off the night before. But by Monday, the concern became real. Trevor was missing. Despite CCTV footage, witness statements, and years of searching, his case remains filled with unanswered questions and painful silence. One moment he was there, caught on camera. And the next, he was gone. But people don't just vanish. Someone somewhere knows what happened to Trevor Deely. This is his story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Trevor Deely was born on August 15, 1978, in Naas County, Kildare, Ireland. He was the youngest of 4 children in a close-knit family. His parents, Anne and Michael, raised Trevor alongside his older siblings, Mark, Michelle, and Pamela. It was a home filled with love, laughter, and strong family ties. Trevor and his brother Mark shared a particularly close bond, often seen side by side throughout their childhood. While his siblings leaned into sports or academics, Trevor followed his own path. He was laid back, thoughtful, and quietly intelligent, with a particular knack for math. He didn't need to be the loudest in the room to be noticed. His calm presence and easygoing nature left a lasting impression on those who knew him. In secondary school, what's known as high school in the U.S., Trevor met Glenn Cullen. The two clicked instantly and became inseparable best friends. As they grew older, their friendship only deepened. Once they turned 18, the legal drinking age in Ireland, weekends often meant heading out to a local pub or a club for a few pints and a good laugh. Now, if you're picturing wild, messy nights out, that's not what this was. Trevor wasn't that guy. From everything we've read and heard, he was social, yeah, but grounded. The kind of person who could enjoy the night without needing to close the place down. He liked a good ale, maybe a cigarette lit with his Zippo, but he wasn't reckless. Trevor smoked occasionally, Benson and Hedges or Marlboro Lights, and was rarely without his trusty lighter. But even in those small details, there was a sense of who he was, laid back, steady, someone who lived with quiet intention. His nights out weren't about excess. They were about connection, laughter, and simply enjoying time with his closest friends. After finishing secondary school, Trevor found himself at a bit of a crossroads. He wasn't exactly sure what direction he wanted to take his life, which, let's be honest, is completely normal. So many teenagers finish school without a clear plan, and Trevor was no different. He decided to pursue a business degree at the Waterford Institute of Technology. While studying, he worked part-time at a local supermarket to help support himself, showing that steady, practical side that his friends and family knew so well. But as the first year wrapped up, it became clear that business just wasn't the right fit. Trevor chose not to continue into his second year. That's when his sister Michelle stepped in with a suggestion. Why not try a computer course in Dublin? Naas, where the Deelys lived, is only about 30 minutes from the city, and a lot of people commute in for school or work. So Trevor took her advice, and it turned out to be exactly what he needed. And isn't it funny how sometimes the right nudge at the right time can completely change a person's path? This course clicked for Trevor. He didn't just get by, he really thrived. After completing his studies, Trevor was offered 3 different jobs, a clear sign of how well he'd done and how in demand his skills had become. Still just in his early 20s, Trevor wasn't quite sure which offer to accept, so he turned to someone he trusted, his dad, Michael. One of the offers was from a bank, and Michael suggested he take that one. Because, as many parents might say, banks are usually safe, steady places to build a career. Trevor took the advice, and in May 1999, he started working in the IT department at the Bank of Ireland Asset Management. The team was small, just 10 people, and they worked out of a striking neo-Georgian building near Leeson Street Bridge. It was the kind of place that had character, with history in its walls and a beautiful view of the canal just outside. Trevor thrived in his role. His manager spoke highly of him. He was dependable, eager to learn, and he also got along with everyone. He wasn't just good at his job, he cared about doing it well. Around the same time, Trevor moved into a flat in Dublin, not far from the office. He shared the space with a friend of his sister Michelle and another woman. It was a typical young adult setup, figuring things out, settling into work life, and carving out a space of his own in the city. In the summer of 1999, Trevor was out with a group of friends, some from his hometown of Naas and others from the nearby town of Kill, when they crossed paths with a group of students visiting from Anchorage, Alaska. Among them was a woman Trevor connected with, and the two kept in touch after she returned home. A few months later, in November, Trevor decided to visit her in the U.S. It was a spontaneous trip, lighthearted and unplanned, the kind that feels exciting in your early 20s. With a few days off work, access to a discounted flight through his friend Glenn, who was a flight attendant, and someone he was curious to see again, he booked the trip. The woman initially hesitated due to upcoming exams, but Trevor made the journey anyway, flying from Dublin to LA and then to Anchorage. Little is known about the woman herself, not even her name. But Trevor's family described the trip as a bit of fun, a short adventure. It was uneventful in the best way. No drama, just a few days exploring a place that fascinated him. He returned to Dublin on the morning of December 5th, then caught a bus to Naas to visit his parents. Over a steak dinner, Trevor, fighting off jet lag, excitedly shared stories of his Alaskan adventure. He was especially captivated by the icebergs, something he couldn't stop talking about. Later that evening, after his father left for work, Trevor stayed a little longer with his mother before heading back to Dublin to rest up for work the next day. Before leaving, he mentioned that he wouldn't be back in Naas that weekend and would see them the following week. But Later, it came to light that Trevor had actually made tentative plans to meet up with Glenn and another friend, Conleth, at Fletcher's Pub in Nace on Saturday night to share some more about his trip. Whether Trevor simply forgot to mention this to his parents in his jet-lagged state or had another reason for keeping it to himself remains unclear. But it's a detail that adds another layer of mystery to the days leading up to his disappearance. 2 days later, on December 7th, Trevor spoke with his dad, Michael. Their conversation was about something simple, mundane even, fixing a blown fuse in Trevor's flat. The kind of everyday chat between a father and son that, in hindsight, feels deeply significant. Michael also reminded Trevor to pick up his contact lenses, which had been delivered to Michael's workplace. The father and son spoke again that evening around 7:30 p.m. And this time, the mood was lighter. Trevor was in great spirits, looking forward to his company's Christmas party that night. After finishing work, he met up with some colleagues at Copperface Jack's, a well-known Dublin nightclub, for a few drinks to start the night. From there, the group headed to the official party, a 1970s-themed dinner at the Hilton Hotel, complete with a live band and plenty of festive energy. Trevor really leaned into the theme, wearing a yellow and brown shirt with beige corduroy trousers. Later in the evening, when dinner wrapped up, a smaller group decided to keep the celebration going. They made their way to Buck Whaley's, another popular nightclub just down the road on Lower Leeson Street. It was less than a 5-minute walk from Trevor's office near the Leeson Street Bridge. It was a night filled with music, laughter, and friends. Trevor was 22, enjoying his job, his life in Dublin, and a holiday season that, by all accounts, felt full of promise. In the early hours of December 8th, as the night wound down, Trevor made the decision to leave the club. It was late, around 3:25 a.m., and the weather outside had taken a turn. Heavy rain poured down, driven sideways by gusts of wind. And to make matters worse, a citywide taxi strike was underway. Public transport wasn't running at that hour, and there weren't many other options. So Trevor did what he'd done plenty of times before. He walked. The distance from Buck Whaley's to his flat was about 2.5 kilometers, or just over 1.5 miles. It wasn't a short stroll, especially in those conditions, but it wasn't unusual for him either. Trevor often walked to and from work, and since the club wasn't far from his office, it wouldn't have seemed like an unreasonable journey. Still, it would have been a miserable walk. Cold, wet, dark. The kind of night where most people would have stayed put if they could. But Trevor, practical as ever, had a plan. He decided to swing by his office on the way. He knew there were usually spare umbrellas lying around. By 3:35 a.m., his keycard was used to open the gate to the building, and CCTV confirmed what the record showed. Trevor had made it there safely. So far, everything made sense. Just a soaked, tired 22-year-old making his way home in the middle of a stormy Dublin night. Nothing to suggest anything was wrong. And yet, something was. Inside the office that night was Carl Pender, a member of the IT team. He hadn't planned to be there, but he was covering a shift for a colleague who'd fallen ill last minute, which meant missing the Christmas party himself. Carl remembers being surprised when Trevor walked in. Soaked to the bone from the rain, Trevor was completely saturated, his clothes clinging to him, hair dripping. It was the kind of rain that soaks through everything, no matter how quickly you move through it. Trevor told Carl he was going to hop on a computer and get something done while he was there. What exactly he was doing isn't known, whether it was work-related, personal, or just a quick check of his emails. We may never know. The two ended up having hot drinks in the canteen, trying to take the chill off, and chatted for a bit about the party. Carl said Trevor had clearly had a couple of drinks, but he wasn't drunk, just relaxed, maybe a little tired. After a few minutes, Carl returned to his desk, and Trevor grabbed one of the branded golf umbrellas the office kept around. And just like that, he was on his way again. CCTV captured him leaving the building at 4:02 a.m., umbrella in hand.
Sometime between 11 and 11:30 p.m., during the event at the Hilton, Trevor called Glenn, who was having a night out with their mutual friend, Conleth. Glenn said the party was too loud and he couldn't hear Trevor, so that he'd call him back. They played phone tag for a bit, but never had a conversation. The last time Trevor called Glenn was in the wee hours, around 4 a.m., and Glenn was already asleep. Usually, Glenn slept with his phone by his bed with the sound on so he could be contacted. However, on this occasion, Glenn plugged his phone into charge downstairs and went to bed without it, something he never did. When Trevor called, Glenn didn't hear the phone ring. When he checked his phone the next morning, there was a voicemail from Trevor saying that he was on his way home and would call again the next day. The last time Trevor's phone was active was 4:06 a.m. on Friday, the 8th of December.
After leaving the office, Trevor was picked up on CCTV a few more times as he made his way through the quiet, rain-soaked streets. The final confirmed sighting came at 4:14 a.m. when he was seen crossing the Baggot Street Bridge, heading in the direction of his apartment. Then, nothing. The next morning, Friday, December 8th, Trevor didn't show up for work. Given that the office Christmas party had been the night before on a Thursday of all days, no one thought too much of it at first. Plenty of people came in late that morning and a few didn't come in at all. But for Trevor, not showing up without calling, that was unusual. It simply wasn't like him. Still, it was easy enough to assume that he was sleeping it off, or maybe taking a quiet day to recover. But by Monday morning, when he missed work again, concern turned quickly into alarm. His manager started asking around, but no one had seen or heard from Trevor all weekend. He tried calling Trevor's mobile, but it went straight to voicemail. That's when the manager contacted HR to pull Trevor's personnel file and made the call to his emergency contact. Something was wrong, and now people were starting to realize it.
It's unclear why his flatmates didn't report him missing sooner. However, it is possible they assumed they missed him going to work on Friday and then that he had just gone back to his hometown for the weekend after that.
When HR finally reached out, it was Anne, Trevor's mom, who answered the call. She was listed as his emergency contact. She hadn't heard from Trevor, not a call, not a text, nothing. So panic set in immediately. Anne called Michael, who was working in Dublin at the time, and told him what she'd just learned. He wasted no time, headed straight to Trevor's flat to see if, by some chance, he was there. But when he arrived, there was no answer. He rang the bell again and again. Nothing. He didn't have a key, so there was no way to check inside. And standing there in the hallway with no sign of his son, Michael's worry deepened. He began to fear the worst. Back home in Naas, Anne was calling everyone she could think of. Friends, relatives, anyone who might have seen or heard from Trevor over the weekend. But no one had. There were no sightings, no casual texts. No one had plans with him. It was as if Trevor had completely dropped off the map. When Trevor's brother Mark got the call, he left immediately to be with their mom, even though his wife was heavily pregnant at the time. He didn't want her making the long drive, but he couldn't stay away. As night fell and still no word from or about Trevor, the decision was made. Glenn and a couple of friends would go to the Garda station in Naas to file a missing persons report. By that point, Trevor had already been gone for 4 days. But for his friends and family, the nightmare had just begun.
The Garda is the Ireland Police and Security Force. It's also sometimes called the Gardaí.
You know, when we started this podcast, I genuinely thought, how hard can it be? Talking to a mic, posted online, become wildly successful? Joke's on me, because instead I was juggling logos, tech issues, and business stuff I didn't even know existed. If I'd had Shopify back then, it would have saved me so much time and stress. It's the all-in-one commerce platform that helps millions of businesses streamline everything, so you can focus on creating and not those pesky spreadsheets. Whether you're selling merch or starting something new, Shopify's got your back. Shopify powers millions of businesses, from big names like Rode to brand new startups. With stunning templates, built-in AI tools, and smart marketing features, it's like having a whole team behind you. From shipping to returns, Shopify makes selling simple. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/murderdiaries. Go to shopify.com/murderdiaries. Shopify.com/murderdiaries. Mark made his way to Dublin, desperate to find some trace of his brother. Armed with what little information they had about Trevor's movements on the night of the Christmas party, he started where the evening began, Copper-Faced Jack's. Maybe, he thought, Trevor had gone back there after the party. But there was no sign of him. From there, Mark retraced the route he believed Trevor would have taken to get home. He walked through the streets, peering into alleyways, checking behind dumpsters, anywhere someone might have ended up hurt or seeking shelter. The path took him past the U.S. Embassy. Hoping for even the smallest lead, Mark stopped and spoke with the security guard. But what he learned wasn't exactly reassuring. With then-President Bill Clinton scheduled to visit soon, security measures had been ramped up in the area. Trash bins had been emptied, manhole covers had been sealed. If anything had happened in that stretch of Trevor's possible route, it was unlikely that any trace would remain. As word spread, the search for Trevor quickly grew. Friends, family, and coworkers came together organizing search parties and canvassing the city. They knocked on doors, handed out flyers, and stood on street corners asking strangers if they'd seen him. They spoke to unhoused people along the canal and back streets, people who might have been out that night, who might have seen something the CCTV didn't. There were multiple possible routes Trevor could have taken home, and every single one was searched. In the days that followed, Trevor's face appeared on flyers, posters, milk cartons, and even GAA match programs. The leaflets handed out at local Gaelic sports games. T-shirts were printed with his photo and details. Dublin, usually buzzing with holiday spirit that time of year, was now covered in signs of a young man who had simply vanished. But his family refused to accept that he had just disappeared. They were determined, tireless, convinced that someone somewhere knew something. But his family refused to accept that he had just disappeared. They were determined, tireless, convinced that someone somewhere knew something. Trevor didn't just vanish into thin air, and they were going to find out what happened. Dublin is a city shaped by water. It sits along the coast with the River Liffey running straight through its center. South of the Liffey is the Grand Canal, and even further south is the River Dodder. All three waterways eventually meet at a single point, near the mouth of the Dublin harbor. A web of rivers and canals that becomes especially important in Trevor's story. Now, on Tuesday, December 12th, 4 days after Trevor was reported missing, divers began searching a stretch of the Grand Canal. The focus was on the section between the Leeson Street Bridge and the Baggot Street Bridge, two crossings Trevor would have had to walk over to get home that night. One of the divers on the team was Tosh Lavery, a former Garda who had conducted many searches before. He later said that this particular stretch of canal was relatively easy to work in, still clear water with very little debris. But despite the favorable conditions, there was still no sign of Trevor. So the search area expanded, farther along the Grand Canal into the Grand Canal Basin, and eventually the River Dodder. The basin, however, proved far more challenging. Draining it wasn't an option. It would have put nearby buildings at structural risk. Divers did what they could with the tools they had, but again, nothing turned up. No phone, no umbrella, no wallet, not even a shoe. And that missing phone raised serious questions. We know Trevor had it with him. He used it to call Glenn on his walk home. But if it had ended up in the water that night, it would have stopped working almost immediately. Phones back in 2000 weren't built to withstand moisture, let alone a canal. But Michelle, Trevor's sister, kept calling it for days. And for a while, it rang. Eventually, the ringing stopped, most likely because the battery died. But that detail, that it rang at all, it's telling. According to Dr. Philip Perry, a senior research fellow at the Radio and Optical Communications Lab at Dublin City University, a phone submerged in water wouldn't ring. The signal wouldn't penetrate more than a few inches. So if the phone had been in the canal since that night, it would have been dead from the start, which meant, at least for a time, that phone was somewhere else. While divers searched the water, Trevor's friends continued to search on land. Conleth, along with others, went business to business along Trevor's likely walking routes, asking if anyone had CCTV footage from the night he disappeared. This is where it gets especially frustrating. Despite Trevor being officially reported missing, it wasn't Garda knocking on those doors for surveillance footage. It was his loved ones. And reportedly, the police weren't thrilled about that. They pushed back, saying it was their job. But time was running out, and Trevor's family couldn't afford to wait. Back then, CCTV footage was nothing like it is now. There were fewer cameras overall, and many recorded onto VHS tapes, which were often reused every 24 hours. If footage wasn't being pulled immediately, it was simply gone forever. Even places that didn't overwrite daily still wouldn't keep tapes for long. There was a narrow window to retrieve anything valuable, and the clock was ticking. Thankfully, the Bank of Ireland had a longer retention policy. They wiped their tapes every 28 days, and that bought just enough time. And when the footage came through, it was clear. Trevor, tall, unmistakable, and holding a branded umbrella, was spotted walking along the rain-slicked sidewalk at 4:14 a.m. His family immediately recognized his unique gait. And he's not alone in the frame. A couple walks a few paces ahead of him, and another man follows behind. Trevor continues forward, calmly, purposefully, until he disappears from view, walking out of frame. It's the last known sighting of him. No more cameras pick him up after that. No one remembers seeing him on the streets. And from that moment on, Trevor Deely is simply gone. Earlier, we talked about how Trevor ended up walking home that night because of a taxi strike. But what we haven't touched on yet is just how much that strike impacted the investigation. With so few taxis on the roads, there were far fewer people out and about, especially the kind who are usually everywhere at all hours, taxi drivers. And in cases like this, they can be invaluable. Taxi drivers see everything. They remember faces, they know the regulars, and they spot the unusual. But that night, the streets were unusually quiet. That entire pool of potential witnesses was suddenly gone. With nothing concrete turning up in Dublin, the Garda started looking further afield, and their attention turned to Anchorage, Alaska, where Trevor had visited just a few weeks earlier. Now, if you remember earlier in this episode, we did mention that the woman Trevor visited hasn't been publicly identified, and that's still true. Her name has never been released, and the details about her remain scarce. But the Garda were able to track her down. They sent 2 officers across the world to speak with her, and according to her account, Trevor's visit hadn't exactly been arranged. She said he more or less just showed up and described him as rather difficult. What she meant by that wasn't clarified in the reporting, and the interview didn't lead anywhere. Trevor's sisters also flew to Anchorage to speak with her directly, hoping they might uncover something useful. But just like the Garda, they returned without answers. In the end, the Alaska trip, strange as it may have seemed, didn't appear to be connected to Trevor's disappearance at all. Despite the lack of progress, this was still one of the highest profile missing persons cases in Ireland at the time. Over 50 officers were assigned to the case in the early days. But even with that kind of manpower, no strong leads emerged, no physical evidence, no reliable sightings, nothing to go on. As time passed and hope began to wane, fewer officers were assigned to the case. The search slowed, the trail grew cold. And as it often happens in cases like this, rumors began to swirl. Some believed Trevor had simply fallen into the canal or the River Dodder, despite the extensive water searches that turned up nothing. Others whispered about a gang known to operate in that part of Dublin, wondering if Trevor had stumbled into something far darker than a wrong turn on a rainy night. But without evidence, it was all just speculation, and Trevor remained missing. 10 years after Trevor disappeared, his father Michael stood before the press on a cold December anniversary. He made a heartfelt appeal, asking anyone with information to come forward. He spoke with quiet determination about the hope his family still held. Hope that maybe Trevor was alive somewhere. That maybe he was out there, safe, working in IT, just like he always dreamed. Not knowing was the hardest part. To accompany the press conference, an age-progressed photo of Trevor was released, an attempt to help the public imagine what he might look like now, a decade older. Maybe someone would recognize him. Maybe it would spark a memory. But still, no answers came. Then in December of 2016, a major development. The investigation was officially reopened. The authorities sent the original CCTV footage to the UK, where experts used advanced software to enhance it, technology that hadn't existed back in 2000. The footage was the only real evidence in the case, so any new detail could be a game changer. Months later, the results came in. And for the first time in 16 years, there was something new. The enhanced video showed a man, partially hidden behind a pillar, standing outside of Trevor's office at around 3 a.m. He wasn't just loitering, he stayed there for quite a while. And when Trevor arrived at the building at 3:34 a.m., the man was still there. The two appeared to exchange a few words. It was brief, and without audio, there's no way to know what was said. Then Trevor entered the building, and the man lingered a few more minutes before crossing the road and disappearing from the camera's view. That was the last time he was seen. On that footage, at least. Fast forward to 4:14 a.m. when Trevor was captured on the Bank of Ireland CCTV, the final known footage of him. And in that grainy photo, someone can be seen walking, then jogging behind him. Investigators believed at the time that it was the same man who had been outside the office earlier. It was the strongest lead the investigation had ever had. Then in 2023, another update. The authorities announced that they had identified the man walking behind Trevor in that final frame. He had been tracked down and cleared of any suspicion. And crucially, he wasn't the same man seen outside the office earlier that night, which means that man, the one Trevor spoke to, still hasn't been identified. And more than 2 decades later, we still don't know who he was, what was said, and why he was there.
Around the same time, an anonymous donor came forward and offered a reward of up to €100,000 for information that could help solve the case.
After the new discovery on the CCTV footage, a fresh team of authorities was brought in to re-examine the case from top to bottom. They weren't just looking at the footage. They were going through everything. And with a new set of eyes, they found something troubling. A number of intelligence reports from the original investigation that had been overlooked. Now, those same reports were being taken very seriously. Suddenly, the tone of the investigation shifted. Foul play was no longer just a theory. It was now being actively considered. In 2017, a credible tip came in from an informant, and it took the investigation in a completely new direction. The claim? That Trevor had unknowingly crossed paths with a well-known criminal the night he disappeared, and that he'd been shot. The tipster said his body had been hidden in a sealed-off area in Chapelizod, about 8 kilometers or 5 miles from where Trevor was last seen. The location was described as a kind of urban wasteland, difficult to access, bordered by river. For 6 weeks, the authorities combed through that area and the adjoining water. It was one of the most intensive searches ever conducted in connection with Trevor's case. And they didn't find a body. They didn't find anything definitively linked to Trevor. They did find a gun, and tests were run, but nothing further was ever reported, which likely means it couldn't be tied to the case. And just like that, another lead dried up.
The Gardaí were very clear about the fact that there was no evidence to suggest Trevor had been murdered, just the say-so of an informant.
In the nearly 25 years since Trevor vanished, nothing has changed on paper. His bank accounts have never been touched. None of his belongings have turned up. Not a trace. Still, the Deely family holds on to hope. In a recent interview with the Irish Times this year, Michelle shared what's at the heart of it for her. She just wants closure. She wants to know what happened after her brother walked out of frame on that final CCTV clip. What happened in those missing minutes? Mark, Trevor's brother, spoke candidly too. He said, "In the years afterward, I had the best of intentioned people coming into me at work saying, sure, poor Trevor. He's in a happy place now. They just assume missing equals dead. That's human nature, but where's the proof? I'm not willing to believe that aliens came down and snapped him away. So something happened. And if something happened, somebody knows." And he's right. Somebody does. Michael, Trevor's dad, says people still approach him even now. And while he knows they can't solve the case, he appreciates their kindness. Sometimes a kind word about Trevor is all he needs. And Trevor's mom doesn't do interviews. And that's completely understandable. Speaking publicly can be incredibly painful for families of the missing. She's chosen to protect herself and her health, and that choice is deeply respected. Anne and Michael lean on their faith to get through each day. They hold on to the belief that one day, someone will remember something from those dark early hours of December 8th, 2000, and finally come forward. Because someone out there knows something. And the Deelys are still waiting for that person to speak. If you have any information about Trevor Deely, please contact the Garda at Pearse Street Station.
Make sure to follow us on all of our socials and subscribe on YouTube. And please, please, please leave a positive review on Apple. Again, it really helps us keep the Murder Diaries going. Your support means everything. We'll see you back on Thursday for another episode of True Crime Coverage. Until then,
Stay safe.
bye.